roughly a half an hour. We've got some questions. We have some time for follow-up questions if anyone is interested in that. With that, I will invite our first candidate, John McGinn, to please come and have a seat with us at the table. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, sir. Good to have you. Nice. Thank you.
I've shaken him before. I'll do it again, though.
And we have as well, I think.
Thank you.
And so thank you for coming. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a minute, but I will introduce my two fellow selectmen, John Clemenzi and Jack Wilhelm.
It's John around the table, except the other end.
John, Catherine. So that should be easy to remember. So I think you know why we're here, or why you're here, and why we're here. We thank you for being interested in the position. I think it would be fair to make a very introductory statement, and I think you know this, that we're looking for an interim town administrator. We think in the range of 3 to 4 months, possibly up to 6. But as such, we're not looking for a change agent as much as we're looking for someone who will support our staff, keep our present initiatives moving along, and oversee the day-to-day operations of the town hall. So just so that if that's not your expectation, let me know, let us know. We have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
I'll start, and people we have about half an hour or so. But if you would spend a few minutes just introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself and what experiences you've had as a town administrator and why you'd be interested in hanging out in Wenham for a little while.
Sure. Well, first off, I do understand that this is an interim position, and as such, I would be surprised if you were looking for a change agent, someone who, in that short a period of time, it wouldn't be realistic. And so I certainly understand the role, and so there's no issue that way. As has been stated, my name is John McGinn. I was most recently town administrator in the town of Marblehead for 3.5 years prior to my retirement last July. And so for that reason alone, I'm only interested in a potential interim position because I'm retired. And, I had, thought and left open the possibility that if these types of opportunities became available, particularly in the North Shore area, because I live in Peabody, and it took me exactly 19 minutes to get here.
Yeah,
wow. So,
nice.
Being a lifelong North Shore resident, I'm certainly familiar with the area, and this seemed like an opportunity for a short-term employment situation where I think because of my experience, which I'll be happy to go into a little bit more, I could be the type of person that you're looking for in terms of, as you said, keeping the day-to-day operations, supporting the departments, and being sort of the, the glue that keeps the various departments working together. I had a very good experience working for the town of Marblehead for 14 years, the first 10 of which I was the finance director, and worked closely with a couple of different town administrators during that period of time. And then when the position became available in late in 2014, I expressed some interest in possibly doing it, and it was one of the best decisions I made. I enjoyed thoroughly being the town administrator. It sort of allowed me to utilize my experience in a variety of different things. If you've seen my resume, at one point in my life I was a local elected official myself in the city of Peabody. I served as a school board member for 4 years, and I served also for 12 years as a city councilor. So I certainly have an understanding for what it is to be an elected official and sort of what the role is, even though I'm not in any way equating a city form of government with a town form of government. I certainly understand the two differences. I've worked in both. I've worked in Marblehead, and obviously for 14 years I understand. I've been through the whole town meeting process with open town meeting, and I see the role of the selectmen are the chief executive body, and the the town administrator is there to support their efforts and to make sure that their policies and their decisions are carried out in the way that was intended. And so I had a very positive experience over the 3.5 years. I would have still been there, except for the fact that I had sort of reached a point in my career where I was eligible to retire, and that made a lot of sense for a whole bunch of reasons. Yeah. So, but I have a strong financial background. I believe you can see from my background, but clearly. I was able to translate. That gave me a very deep understanding because of working in 3 different municipalities what department operations are, and have I believe a strong understanding of what it takes to deliver municipal services in a high quality way.
Follow-up relative to John's experience?
Sounds
John
impressive.
McGinn's experience.
It looked like a majority of your background is financial.
Yes.
But from an operational point of view, and we've got a very good finance director with us.
In fact, she's right here.
I know. I met her.
I didn't notice. Though I heard what Catherine said earlier, we're not looking for a change agent, but given that you could be here anywhere from 3 to 6 months or whatever, would it be reasonable to think that you would be able to assess this board of your evaluation of the town and its performance based on the experience you have, which is quite vast overall, and let us know where we may have weaknesses or strengths by the time you...
Sure. I mean, I would certainly be more than willing to, and over the period of time that I would be potentially here, that if I saw things that made sense to raise to the board's attention, where I thought, there could be some consideration going forward for improvement, not necessarily while I'm here, but longer term, I certainly would view it as my responsibility to make you aware of that. But I do want to caveat that I'm one of these people who I think you have to take the time to listen, to observe, and to not just jump in and think you know better than everybody else. And that's never been my approach, because you don't necessarily get the whole view of things when you initially go in. You have to take time to learn.
Yeah, my first year on the board, I didn't say boo, because I had no idea.
When did you change that, John?
Well,
Before these two get out of control, you can tell we have a fairly casual atmosphere here, which we're comfortable with, and it's the way we operate. So, but what you said just segues into the second question, and this is.
Can I go back to the first question?
Oh,
I don't have a
certainly,
chance.
certainly.
So that we had an audit committee meeting this morning, early at 7:30, and finance director was there, and that the auditors gave us a totally clean bill of health, and it was highly complimentary of our finance director, and they had no recommendations at all as to what we should do differently. So I just want to compliment our finance director here publicly for doing a great job in the short time she's been here, and that we're not looking for any additional insight on how you can do a better job from one selectman anyway. So that
well, I did qualify that in my question.
So, but anyway, it was. It's nice to get an outside opinion, so that being said, that I just want to make sure that I have a concern that's nothing to do with the finance department, that we've got lots of initiatives going. I think the most controversial and public one is the remake of our town roads in front of us, because it's highly congested with traffic.
That's right.
And so that we have a huge effort underway with the state for perhaps $3.5 million. A controversial piece. A lot of people think, oh, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that, and we can't do this, but nevertheless solve the traffic problem. So keep that on a steady path is probably the most important thing in my mind that we have to do by the time you get here, town meeting will have been over, so that all of that will have been done. But lots of people are very, very interested, including me and the selectmen here, in as to what the final options are of that, and that working closely with the state and getting the money necessary to do that, and having something that doesn't destroy the small town atmosphere, yet solves the traffic problem in town, is what we're all looking for. And that, so there's different views on that, and I think that from my perspective, if you could lend your steady hand in terms of facilitating an outcome that is approved by most people, would be very, very helpful to us, because there's a lot at stake, and that money-wise and as well as traffic-wise. That's.
I agree, and I agree with Jack, oh my gosh, I can tell already.
Come on,
I'm in
it's not
trouble.
that hard.
Something's wrong. Something. Play that back. Play it back.
I agree with Jack. I know those were hard words for me to. Kidding. That there are a lot of things going on in town. You know, it seems like sleepy little Wenham. I think you've probably spent some time talking to Peter. He probably has surprised you. It's not quite as sleepy, and he's promised me that he's going to leave an exhaustive list of everything that he's working on right now, so that whoever precedes him, both in an interim way and a permanent way, knows what needs to be done and what status different projects are in. And it occurs to me that we should probably get a hand on that list and put some priority on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Short-term and longer-term priorities, so that
excellent idea.
the person coming in would have some sense.
Well, I mean, just to respond a little bit to what was just said, I certainly have experience working on those types of projects, both when I was in Marblehead, in terms of getting input from the various viewpoints in terms of what people are looking to do, and obviously there is no shortage of opinions when it comes to
Right.
road projects. It's probably one of the thorniest things to deal with, because
We're finding that out.
yeah. And if you looked at my resume years ago, I used to work for Mass Highway when it was that. Now it's
that's
Mass
right,
DOT.
yeah.
And I was the capital budget director for there, and was very familiar with a lot of the planning process and everything that went on. I don't have any magic wands, so I don't want to oversell this, but I guess I do want to point out that I do understand that process and do.
Good.
Helpful. It would be helpful.
It's a biggie.
So, for the sake of the people who work in the office and us, I guess, could you tell us a little bit about your management style, how you, what your approach would be, especially in the interim time of relationship with working with staff? And would you think that that relationship or that approach would be different in an interim position than in a permanent position?
Well, I think the best way to describe my management style is, I try to be collaborative, and I try to get input from as many people who are stakeholders in decisions that have to be made, but also with the relevant staff. I am not, I don't believe I'm authoritative and overbearing or anything like that. I find myself to be I've had much more success with being collaborative, as I say. But ultimately, if you can't get everybody to agree, it is a decision has to be made. But I always try to caveat that with a full understanding to everybody involved why the decision was made and how, and even if it's not something that they are totally comfortable with. I will say, in terms of my experience with working in town government and what have you, and working with not only staff but with other boards and commissions and what have you, is I try to find ways where everybody feels like they didn't lose, and that they got something out of the agreement that was made. Because I find that if you make it into winners and losers, you're very rarely going to succeed.
And we ask that question because our staff is incredibly important to us and has evolved over some period of time into a very, we believe anyway, a very high-functioning group, a team of people. So we it's important that
I'm extremely happy
culture-
to hear you say that you value your staff.
Yeah, we
because
really do.
I think, there's no more important resource that a town has than dedicated people that work for
yeah,
it.
and you'll find,
We
totally
do.
find
That's
that.
right, we don't make something, we're service.
Yeah.
And if people don't keep that in mind and work together as a team, the service goes away, and
Right.
it shows up in the end results.
So ideally, and I say ideally because I know everyone's situation is different, even our candidate's situation different, the time frame for this position would start about the 8th of April, which is 1 week before Peter's last day. And this is, I think, a little optimistic, go into early August, which is I think the shortest period of time we think that we could go through a search process. And we are, by the way, looking to hire an executive search firm to help us with the permanent process. But it will be August, before that can happen. But the most important thing is to find the person that's going to work the best. And so to that end, we have a little bit of flexibility. We'll make some flexibility, I guess. But the question still remains, with that time, does that general time frame work for you in your life and what you're doing right now?
Yes, I think I
In other words,
should.
you're going to take a summer cruise and to Europe for a month?
I'll be here. I am, from a time frame standpoint, I think I had shared with Peter, and I presume he shared it with the board, that I have some plans that from, roughly mid-March to mid-April, which are really,
So that precedes.
they're long.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, and, they're pretty non-negotiable since it involves my wife and.
No comment.
And,
No comment is right.
Yeah,
no, and all kidding aside, it's a long planned,
sure.
Sure.
so the,
It's all right.
but having said that, after that, I'm pretty, the timeframe you're describing, I'm available.
All right. And the biggest issue, well, one of the issues with that is it's important, we think, to have some FaceTime with Peter before he leaves. So perhaps you and he could talk about that, and that could even be a few hours here or there sometime before
Yeah.
mid-March. Because there's so much, there's just so much you can do over the phone or by email. So to have a few hours
Absolutely.
here, and you'd be willing
Absolutely,
to
and
work
I
something
think-
out.
I mean, my feeling is that can be worked out, and I would certainly make myself available, and I know he would.
Yeah.
So in other words, a reasonable handoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a busy time, certainly for us here. I don't
Yeah.
know when the town meeting is in Marblehead.
First Monday in May,
Oh,
so we're a little bit later than
a
you.
little bit later. We used to be the first Saturday in May.
We should still be there.
And we
but we're not.
probably should, but that's for another meeting.
Until it snows out on town meeting day, I'm never going to get my way to.
Are you still connected with Marblehead?
Someday I will.
In any sense of responsibility, or you completely?
I'm completely
you're-
separated.
Yeah, I'm retired from him. Okay, so whoever, the person that we choose will have, a sort of working agreement, kind of a contract that will have some negotiation in it, and that will, some of this will be around that. But in general, we're looking for a person to be in the office, and again, we'll have to flesh this out a little bit more, but between 25 and 35 hours a week, plus, and you know this, meetings.
Sure.
Certainly every selectmen's meeting, and depending on the issues that are coming up, there could be other nighttime meetings of other boards that having the TA's presence might be useful. So
That's nothing I'm not used to.
yeah, I wouldn't imagine that it would be.
But generally, after town meeting, the meetings go down in terms of.
Generally, we've got some other.
It's a quieter time.
We always have meetings, but, let's face it, after town meeting,
The time that you're gone, if there was a time that someone could be gone, that's probably a good time to not be available, because usually the couple of, as John says, a couple weeks after town meeting especially are not, hopefully, particularly too. Of course, if we have a school budget that we have some
we're all
issues
going to
with.
Cancun anyway.
Yeah, and I'm going to wait to see the result of the override votes first. So, and,
That's true, Catherine. Very
right?
good. That's a good
We
point.
could be.
We could be, that's right.
Yeah,
You're right.
we're looking at multiple overrides for we have a regional school district. So
Understood.
multiple overrides in our school district, which you do understand, having been on a school committee. I mean, at least you understand how the budget probably works. But in a regional district, both towns have to agree on the budget.
Sure.
And as an override, it'll be on, it's only an override in Wenham, so not an override in Hamilton. So hopefully, we will end up, after all of those ballots, with a school budget done, or we could be at the school
And
budget
how much
until
are you
August.
seeking as a amount for the override?
It's about 650,000 right now.
Which is very large.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
They're
not-
50% of our budget,
sure.
and we have
At
no
least.
control over them.
Well, we have our town issues as well, you know, finance issues, which would take you about 5 minutes to understand if you just look
Really, I was going
at
to say.
some of our stuff. So money is, money is tough.
I mean, I can't say I did it in depth. You have a very impressive budget document, but I did take a quick look at it, and so I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, so hopefully it's going to be a quiet time. Do you have any questions for us at this point?
No, I think you've been pretty clear about your expectations. I just, I guess I would just ask one question, which is, how does the board interact with the town administrator on a normal basis, and sort of, other than the meetings themselves, so what is this board's expectations that way?
Well, that could vary by individual,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
Well, the chairman, obviously, we have been rotating the chairmanship, and that the chairman meets by statute to come up with the agenda for the subsequent meeting we're going to have, forthcoming meeting, and that it's publicized, and that the other two selectmen generally meet once a week in person or by phone, or even more often, over selected issues. Perhaps the town administrator would send out email multiple times a week about some issue, and that one of us may have a concurrent opinion, which it'd be easy to text or email back, or we may have want more information about a particular subject. Lately, we've had some controversial issues, such as affordable housing, a Maple Woods project that is coming to fruition in the town meeting, so we might, what's going on, what's the latest, so on and so forth. And so that Peter would brief us as to that, or whatever else is going on in town, or anything that might be particularly contentious or potentially contentious on the next agenda. But beyond that, it's a casual, come on in, spend a half hour, an hour, and that once a week, sometimes more frequently, sometimes less frequently, and that, but he, on his own, would send out emails and texts to us multiple times a week on whatever issues were going on in town that there was some update on, and that whether we had a particular interest in that subject or not, we would be so advised through his frequent communications with us, which was very helpful.
And I think Peter we have enjoyed a very open door policy of being able to go and talk about whatever, but one of the things that I appreciate, I don't ever like to receive, especially controversial, but information from a neighbor. So it's always nice if there's some town information that come from the town administrator before your next door neighbor says, hey, I heard there was a scandal or whatever, or even an issue. So there's a lot of communication. Most of it, as Jack said, is casual, but
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I've sort of lived by the motto that well, in this case, 3 people. I used to have a 5-member board, but the last people that should ever be surprised are the members of the Board of Selectmen, so.
that's a good
Right.
motto.
So communication is fundamental, in my opinion. And I still work for a living, so I have a somewhat limited time schedule.
But they turned up the heat in this room, didn't they?
So I'll
Yes.
I'll
Maybe
pipe
you can
in
fix
as
it
I
when you get
need to, or send a note to Peter, or text or something.
Yeah.
And then follow up when you can get a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, and just for full disclosure, usually shortly after town meeting happens, we reorganize the board, so the chairmanship may rotate.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Anything else you'd like to ask us or tell us? I think I mentioned to you in the hall that we're talking to two gentlemen this evening, and that we're not scheduled to really deliberate this evening, but that tomorrow we have a regularly scheduled selectmen's meeting, and we do have an agenda item which would allow us to discuss the candidates and, quite honestly, hopefully, be able to choose one of them. So we're on a pretty tight time frame relative to this. So we will be getting back to you one way or another.
Sure.
Well, tomorrow evening.
Yeah.
Even if we, for some reason, can't make a decision, we would keep you posted about
Okay.
that. And I know Peter has your contact information.
That would
so.
be unlikely. Yeah.
It seems unlikely, but I never know. So that's what we have.
And if there's anything else I can provide the board, I'd be happy to do that. And, feel free if you want to talk to anybody in the town of Marblehead that I was there, I would not have any problem with anybody asking.
Yeah, we probably would.
Powers and Sullivan gave you a plug this morning, by the way.
Is that really? Nice.
Well, that's always nice. I think we probably would make a few phone calls before we sign the contract. But thank you, very much for coming in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Okay.
talk to you soon.
Nice to meet you all.
Same.
And I'm going to ask for about a 5-minute recess
Thank
for
you.
this meeting to reconvene at just about a few minutes after 8.
All right, thanks.
This, for everyone's information, is John Petrin. He's another candidate for interim town administrator. This will be boring for those of you who are sitting at this table, because I'm going to just say a few words that I said about 30 minutes ago. Thank you for coming to talk with us tonight. And I think you know this already, that we're looking for an interim town administrator. As you know, Peter will be leaving middle of April. Yep. And it's we think the position will be 3 to 6 months. So we're not quite sure, it depends. We do have we will be hiring an executive search firm to help us find the next permanent person. But you know how that process is a little bit variable on how long it takes. Since it is an interim position, although we're very interested in any observations you might have, we're looking for a person who can support our staff. It's very important to us. Oversee the operations of Town Hall in that period of time, and to keep present projects, and you'll hear a little bit more about them, I'm sure, moving along, but not necessarily coming in to just, overhaul Town Hall. It's working pretty well right now. There's always room for improvement, but we just really need to keep the wheels turning. So we have a couple of questions for you, and hopefully at the end you'll have a chance to ask us any questions. These are not going to be like surprise or tricky questions. You've been around long enough to have heard most of these questions.
How many numbers are divisible by 6?
No, we just like to, we have, a sort of brief period of time here to get to know you. So we're just going to ask you to talk a little bit about yourself, what you do now, what your past experience has been, and why you're interested in an interim position, especially in Wenham.
Okay, so you have my resume, so you see the various positions. So this is an interesting day for me. I just left a selectmen's meeting for my final time as a permanent town administrator, so I'm retiring as of Thursday from the business.
Congratulations, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward. This has been certainly my job, but my passion, for 40 years. So I've been in municipal government since 1979. I've never worked full-time in the private sector. So I've been a town administrator since 1985. So this has been, what I do. So I'm sure one of the questions you're going to have, so, I'm coming out of the town of Burlington, so I just left my selectmen's meeting for the last time, and, it was sad but great, at the same time, leaving. But, Burlington, you look at Burlington, and it's not Wenham, so.
This is true.
It's not even Burlington 20 years ago.
It's not Burlington 20 years ago, and it's not Burlington when I started there 7 years ago. The growth has just been tremendous, and so my job there is quite different. So I'm going to go back to my time in the town of Harvard. So I was 13 years in the town of Harvard as town administrator. Yeah, what's that?
That's a pretty small.
Yeah, so actually I did, I pulled off.
Town.
Great town. I enjoyed my time there. So I just pulled from the state. Oh, come on, just pass down. So this is just the state provides a community at a glance. Oh, yeah. So this just shows Harvard against Wenham, and my point is it's fairly similar. So I worked 13 years there. In 1988, I was the first town administrator appointed in the town of Harvard, and I was there for 13 years till 2001. So what I can tell you is that I understand. I haven't been in a Wenham in a few years, but I worked 13 years in a town very similar. So when you look at the departments, when I was in Harvard, I had a police department of 8 full-time, police officers. Public Works was 7. Public Works meant, highway was the number 1 division. We had a very small water section in the center of town, and then it was cemeteries and parks, and that's what, Public Works was. I didn't have full-time fire, so we had a completely, volunteer, fire department. My staff in town hall, was myself and 1 person in my office, 2 in treasury, 2 in assessors, 1 in town clerk, 1 accounting, and 1 generalist who worked the front desk and assisted. So I worked 13 years in an environment just like Wenham. So I get, to understand, and I miss those days to some extent. Now, my staff gets to do the spreadsheets, gets to do things, and I'm in the meetings, and I don't do as much of that, day-to-day work. So I understand exactly what you're looking for. I've been in a position where I've hired people to come in and maintain what's going on. You have a great town here, and so I'm not here to, change up. I get that concept. So my concept, my understanding is I'm coming here to work with you, the Board of Selectmen, to maintain what you have and to make sure that the next person you hire, who hopefully is going to be a great person, comes in and is able to do that job. I have other varied skills. I was an assistant superintendent of schools for 4 years. I get to understand the school side of things for the city of Marlborough, so a big system. Assistant superintendent there. I've been in...
that was a regional system also?
No, that was a city system.
Oh, one
so 5,500 students in the city. So, it was, the city population was 40,000, but we had a pretty good size school system with, it was a great experience, for those 4 years. But it was my wife who told me, I'm a town administrator. She saw the difference when I had the opportunity. She said, this is who you are. So I went back, on the town side doing that. So I have that experience. I've been involved in various things over years. I'm a former president of the MMA. I'm a former president of Managers Association. I currently have been on for 20 years as a commissioner in the Police Accreditation Commission for the state. So we accredit police departments within the state of Massachusetts. I'm a member of the Joint Labor Management Committee for the state, which is gubernatorial appointment, but you work with the communities on police and fire contracts. So those communities that can't come to an agreement, we go in to work with them to attempt to seek agreement. So I've been in places around here, that couldn't get agreement, and so have a lot of experience with, negotiating side. So I think what I bring is a lot of people skills to the table. I think what you would hear about me is that I empower and work with staff, and staff, our employees are our only asset, really. Those are the people we have to work with, and trying to work with them and getting them to see, public service is a great place to be, and so do a lot of that work. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm also involved in the Managers Association, so I was one of the co-founders of what we call boot camp for managers. So we work with new managers on a yearly basis. We do a full-day seminar, and with new managers come in and talk about what we didn't learn, in graduate school. I have a master's degree, but there was a lot I didn't learn. And myself and another person, Jeff Nutting, the town administrator in Franklin, we kept talking for a couple of years about what we didn't know when we came to this job and what we learned on the fly, over the first couple of years, and we tried to harness that and put it together, and so that's what we developed was boot camp, and it's become very successful. So do a lot of talk about that. I was just on a phone conference with ICMA, which is the International City Managers Association, a couple of weeks ago with a leadership class. They do classes on that. I spoke to them for an hour in a phone conference on board manager relations, things we talk about. How does a manager be successful, in their job? What should they know coming in, working with a Board of Selectmen? Some of the do's and don'ts relative to that. So I've got a whole list of that.
We told them those.
You guys can be a handful sometimes, so we gotta,
just three of us.
Work towards that. Not you? Okay.
Milk toast here.
Yeah.
We're pretty easy going here.
Follow-up questions on that?
Yes, I have two. And that first one, just delicately, you retired, or you're retiring next week, and you had your last meeting today.
Yes.
And you are applying to be our interim town administrator. So but then why did you retire?
So
You seem to like the job.
I love what I do, but the 70 hours a week, the constant piece of it, just at a point where I want to try something different and do some other things. My wife's not retiring; she's a little younger than I. I got smart, and she's still going to be working going in. So I've got a couple of things. I got to have dinner ready, and I got to do laundry, and a few of those things. So I'm afraid of that. that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but I love to cook, actually. I can do that. But I'm still a little bit, I know I don't want to completely retire 100%, but I want to cut it back a little bit. And this is an opportunity to do that. And so I haven't figured out my next stage in life. But there's a few things I want to get done, but I have the opportunity here. And I thought, when Peter gave me a call last week, we were talking, and where this would start up in April, it gives me a little bit of time to just, relax for a month and a half, and then you're not looking for 40 hours, you're looking for something 25 to 30 hours. I thought that would be an opportunity, because again, it's not long-term commitment. Whether I whether I need more readjusting going in, and I thought this was a great opportunity. So cutting it back down to 25 to 30 hours and doing a maintenance type position, because again, I'm not coming in looking at your, one of the hardest things we do is look at the 5 years down the road. That's not, I'll assist with that here, but that's not going to be my role to, to project that out. And that's the toughest thing we do, is that true long-term planning. I can certainly help with that if that's what the board wants, but falling back and seeing how this retirement gig is going to work, I thought this was interesting.
Very good answer, by the way. So my second is a comment, not a question.
Sure.
So you said what you didn't learn in school, and you learned in this other thing. So it just reflected on, I have an MBA, and that what I learned in subsequent managerial jobs far up, what I really learned in life about financial management, which is where I came from, I didn't learn at MBA school. I learned on the job, in public accounting, and subsequent financial managerial jobs. So it was interesting that I don't know what you learn. Anyway,
yeah,
I
need
thought
to get that degree,
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is. John, anything other John?
I think you've covered it pretty well.
Yeah, you did.
You've had a lot of territory.
Yeah, like I say, you see my resume, and if you dig into it, the little pieces,
resume
that
doesn't
come out.
do half of what you just did.
Yeah, and I believe in community. I've been on a Boys and Girls Club for 25 years on the board of directors. I'm the senior director now, involved with that.
Better to put your time and energy.
So that's where I found my way, outside of the job.
Yeah.
So I believe in public service, and it's corny, and maybe sounds like I'm in an interview right now, but that's the
come from
that's the
corporate
life.
America.
Yeah.
So this ought to be run like a business, and you just model it towards the end user and save tax money if you can and where you can, and that sort of thing. But
yeah, and we've tried to, I've been part of a lot of regional efforts, in the past when I was with Harvard, and those are so difficult here in New England.
Yeah.
And I know you
are hard to break down.
Oh, absolutely. And I tried to work with regionalizing a fire department, with two communities that had full-time fire departments, not just volunteers. And let me tell you, I hear some, I've got the bruises of the marks.
Working with Middleton.
Same here.
Yeah, we've been down that road.
Call dispatch.
The dispatch, I've done 2 of those studies.
It should have been
3 of those
singing
studies.
years ago, and instead, no, everybody wants to stay in their own
and you
little
can't
pile.
get there. It's so difficult to bring people along. So we've been able to do a few things over my career. When I was in Ashland, regionalized. We did veteran services, we did animal control. Those are low-hanging fruit things, but we did animal control, veteran services. Tried some other pieces, and that's one thing I missed when I went to Burlington, because being in a community like that, everything's so large in our departments, that it's a different piece there. But we did look at dispatch when we were in Burlington with a few other communities, and actually the numbers weren't there to make it work.
Yeah, it's hard.
So.
Before I get to the next question, just a couple of comments. We are a quiet town here in Wenham, but we're not quite as quiet as you might think. So although it is definitely probably a less onerous job than you have in Burlington, I would want to be completely clear to say that it's not sort of sit around with your feet up kind of job.
Yeah.
We do have, as you mentioned, a pretty small staff, so everybody does a little bit of everything.
Yes.
We don't, there are no assistants to the town administrator, although we have a crackerjack executive administrator. And so the hands-on thing, two other things which I think you've touched on a little bit. Communication is incredibly important to us, between you and our board, between you and townspeople, between you and the staff. And we work very hard to be transparent. So it's an open, and we've worked hard over a number of years. So even though this is an interim position, we don't want to go backwards on some of those things. But my next question, and you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to elaborate because, as you said, our staff is our most important thing. Our most important asset. And so my question is, what is your approach? What's your management style? What's your approach to working with staff? And do you imagine that would be any different in an interim position than it is in a permanent position?
Yeah, it's the same. You are who you are. So you come in and, my style, I can use all the words, inclusive and open,
yeah, right,
and all those pieces. And I think if it's interesting, and, it's like, tonight at the Selectmen's meeting, I'm coming off a real high here because
yeah,
they had, a lot of my, staff and department heads there,
yeah,
for it, and I got to hear some things, and, my wife was, she attended, that meeting, first time she's ever been, to a selectmen's meeting or any town meeting,
smart woman,
with
smart
me.
woman.
Yeah, yes, exactly. She doesn't do this, at
Yeah.
all. So we've learned, to stay
You got
away.
your territories.
Yeah, exactly. And she's got her things, and this is mine. But she was there tonight, and we talked after, and she just said, one thing she said to me, I'm really proud, of what you've accomplished because they talked to you about you as a leader, in there, and the fact that I was always open, to the discussion. So, that I always carry, I don't get flustered, was a word. And so I try to let people work. So when I come in, when I went into Burlington, I said, I'm joining your team. This is your team, so especially in an interim position, I'm not coming in and shake things up. So you have a team here. So I'm the last cog coming into that team. So my goal is to assist that wheel in working and not take over the wheel. So I'm going to be the cog so it doesn't get stopped, in there. And, back to my Harvard days, I joke about I knew what a plunger was, because well, you may, because, yeah, exactly, that's what a small town is, and so, I had that, for the 13 years, and I had to be prepared, to assist at any point, because in Burlington, I can just, pick up a phone and there's someone there, and, which I kind of, I miss the days. Of actually, getting in the middle of what goes on. But yeah, so I get that concept. And so my piece coming in here would be to assist, to work with staff. Hey, have you looked at this as an idea? And I don't tell. My role is not to come in and say, this is the way you need to do it. This is government, and you talk about the difference between corporate America and government is, government can go back around your back and go to town meeting, can go and make things hard for you if you don't do it, in a sensitive way.
That's right.
So you have to be sensitive in the way you do it. You have to understand who the parties are, who the constituents are, and it's not just the residents of the town. A volunteer fire department, I can tell you, you're not going to tell them necessarily, how the job's going to get done.
That's exactly right.
But
they've been doing it.
They've been doing it. They know it. They got their way of doing it. And sometimes, you want to tweak it, so you suggest around the corner.
Also, too, a small community like this, one of the very first things I learned was that it has a culture and a custom.
Ugh.
And we're 375 years old this past year.
Yeah.
And who am I to try to break everybody's back over what I think? And so first, you need to figure out what that culture and custom is, and then who the players are, and then...
So we have a saying in Burlington, the Burlington way. So I had to understand, what that meant. First of all, I had to understand the family tree. Whew. Getting to, someone's going to have to give me the family trees here, who's related to who, how's all this
We'd like to
interact.
surprise you with that.
Every town has their own way. So you have to understand that.
Go look at the nosy book.
Exactly. I know what that is. So you look at those things, and you need to understand. I learned a long time ago, my first job, that we had a situation going. And we had this house with sewer overflowing outside the house in the yard, and a real nasty situation. So I let the chairman of my board know, and and I had learned early on. I didn't say a word. He says, "Don't talk anymore. It's my daughter." I always use that example when we talk about boot camp and teaching, with that class. Wow. That's an example, I always use, that it was, it's close, it's always close to home when you're in these towns. Mm-hmm. Politics is local. Come to a municipality and you'll see how local it gets. Mm-hmm. It's local by the street. Yeah. So.
It's true, but
Very interesting.
It's so true, everything you've said. We're pretty proud of our, in town hall, especially about our professionalism, yes. Even though there's all of that. Yes.
And so you work around that. That's something you need to understand, but that doesn't mean you stop, in your professionalism and right. training and taking it to the next level. Right. And towns have come a long way since I started,
Just in the last 10, 12 years that I've been involved, yeah. I can't believe the changes that have...
The difference is, and sometimes we lead in those changes. I think, communities sometimes lead in the communications and working with people, and sometimes we don't take enough credit for that, mm-hmm. In the way we do things. But it is different, and you always have to remember there's town meeting behind everything, and every decision I've always made, I always have to realize can be changed. So that's the difference. Corporate America, once the board of directors states something, that's it until the board of directors change it. Yeah. Not here.
No, we've learned that, haven't we? Okay, so talking about time frame, logistics a little bit. Sure. Peters told us that his last day will be April 12th. And I know that he's spoken to you a little bit, and he shared a little bit about us. But in an ideal world, there'd be a little bit of an overlap with Peter before he leaves. And then the job would probably go till sometime in August. There's going to be some kind of working contract. Sure. So the date slightly to be determined, but whenever our new person is available. But we need also, the most important thing is for us to find the right candidate. But I need to ask if that time frame generally works with your newly retired life.
Yes, so I did talk to Peter about it. So I'm away. I'm going to Red Sox spring training in March for a week. And then my wife and I are off 2 weeks in April, the first 2 weeks. But I can, she said if need be in the second week, we could make arrangements, to change that. But after that, away July 4th week, and then a week in September. Otherwise, I have availability, which would be a normal, right. availability of, anybody working a job a couple sure. weeks. Sure. So and then I have
gotten off a routine of at least 5 days a week, if not.
Exactly. So I'm going to have to wean off this starting Friday. So this is Friday is my first day of a new life. So I got to see how that's going to work. But I have plenty of time in March, early April right. to to sit with Peter. I know you're going into your town meeting. I miss those Saturday town meetings early on. I have time to do that. So I think there would be that. The only discussion would be that second week, in April, right. whether I come back early or not to,
Yeah, I think that's less of a concern. We were talking about that earlier. It tends to be a little bit quiet for us, hopefully, yeah. after town meeting. Anyway, my concern is more that you have some time face-to-face with Peter before he leaves.
So, except for the 1 week in March,
right.
I've got pretty much the month. To come in, spend a few hours at a time, or whatever that takes.
You can have a reasonable handoff.
Because Peter might be a little busy, but you'd be open to...
And it'll be for him, and I know Peter a little bit, so it'll be for him and I to work out.
Right, exactly.
How
whatever works, but
how
it
to
would
do that.
Make us. I think it would make us feel. I said earlier, Peter has promised us a list of everything that he's working on right now so that nothing falls through the cracks. And I think it's a pretty long list, not all of which would be, in the hands of the interim, but certainly there would be some things that a face-to-face
Sure.
handoff would
And I'd be glad to
make
attend
more
your
sense.
selectmen's meetings, as they fall through March in that period, so.
Okay. Well,
And just to sit in and see.
Okay. We'll be having a lot of meetings.
Jack had asked a good question earlier that I
Wow.
thought.
I forgot what it was. What was it,
Well-
John?
It has to do with the road out here?
Oh, yes. Well, the biggest, that was a previous, so the biggest thing we have going on, other than town meeting, obviously, is, I'll call it a repositioning of, we have a huge traffic problem out here. And that little small town of Wenham has a traffic problem.
State highway.
And I did read in the Globe that Boston
Not
is
the
number one.
expressway.
But traffic last 5 years has been huge, and so we've had the state come in, and that they're evaluating what options we have to basically lessen the traffic congestion here. And that can be somewhat controversial. People are worried about, do we still keep the same small-town feel?
Yeah.
It's all that stuff like that. Yet, and so that it's going to require a lot of public input and public presentations and controversy, and that we want to fix it, but we need we need buy-in from the public, at least educate the public anyway. So I would say in the next 6 months or a year, the number one thing, other than keep the trains running around here, is to basically facilitate and coordinate with the state a plan that's mostly approved by most of the public, and that to present options, et cetera, so that I mentioned that a few minutes ago, and I think my two colleagues probably would agree that that's
I think, yeah, that's why I brought it back up,
Thank you,
because I
John.
felt it was
Thank you.
quite important, because back to the culture and custom.
Yes.
As a good friend of mine says, well, this is like Mayberry RFD to some great degree. But at the same time, you need to have your roads and your traffic addressed, because there's been so much development north of here, and we're the recipient of
Right.
huge traffic flow, and trying to get out from these side streets, and this building here alone, you take your life in your hands.
And in the next, in the timeframe that our interim would be here, there's probably the biggest part of that will be public input. It's already been
Right.
represented, and we've had meetings, but we've made a commitment to hearing from various constituencies, neighbors of certain roads that would likely be affected. And we haven't had too much of a chance to start that. So I can imagine that that's going to be a big part of that in the next
it
few
really
months.
needs to be fixed too.
Yeah. Everyone seems to agree. There's too much traffic, and we need to fix it. It's just,
How to fix it.
how to fix it.
Process is everything, though.
Yeah.
And getting to a,
Write
to a solution. And so, Burlington and traffic, you want to
yeah,
think about
you're
one of the
familiar.
top things I've
True.
dealt with
There you
in
go.
my 7 years there.
Everybody
You know,
wants better, but nobody wants it to happen
Sure.
and change something for
Well,
them.
that's
Cell
it.
towers we have horrible cell reception here.
Yeah.
Nobody
I
wants a
noticed the
cell
one
tower.
bar when I was waiting.
That's
You're
pretty
lucky.
good.
Come,
Yeah, that's
come to
pretty
my
good.
house, and you got to go up to the front
Now,
window to
John-
get a reception.
That's deliberate, actually.
Do a Green Acres and climb the pole.
Yeah, that's right.
In the few minutes we have left, I think you mentioned it, and Peter's talked to you. We are talking about 25 to 35 hours a
Yes.
week. We're certainly talking about some meetings, selectmen's meetings, and what maybe some other meetings. We have some market rates, which we would be able to talk to you about in a contract. So that's something we have to figure out. So we're doing these interviews tonight. The goal and the plan is at our regularly scheduled meeting tomorrow, we have an agenda item, because we're not really going to deliberate tonight about this. I'm going to sleep on it. And tomorrow we will deliberate and hopefully choose an interim town administrator.
Okay.
So one way or another, someone will be talking to you later in the evening. We have a pretty long agenda. So later in the evening.
We're bringing pillows, right?
We're bringing pillows. I'm thinking about pizza. I'm really thinking pizza. Or maybe chocolate ice cream or something. It's our run-up. We
both.
close the warrant
Or
tomorrow night
stimulants,
for the town.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so busy time.
A busy time. So with that said, I just want to make sure that all is generally acceptable, but you've talked about
Yes.
that. Do you have any questions for us before we?
No, I don't believe so. This is, hopefully you've, gotten to know me a little bit here, during this process. I'm looking forward to, transitioning into my new life, coming here. I think this would be a great opportunity to do that. So I talked to Peter a couple times. I saw him at the MMA when, he was being a finalist in Brewster. And so I've talked to him over the years, and I think this would be a great opportunity. So the questions will come if you decide to choose me. Then I'll have a lot of questions. But I think I understand what I'm getting into. This type of thing. I've got an adjustment to make. To be an interim. I've not done that, but I've been a town administrator since 1985.
Well, you teach some of these courses.
So I'm involved with this, and so I've got the background, and so I think I understand. And I think what I've shown in the resume is that I adapt. So that I'm flexible. I can adapt. So as I pointed out, that's why I brought that piece in to show you. I did 13 years in the town of Harvard, very similar, to this community, and it was a great 13 years. I was there for the Devons project, when Devons closed. So that was
a tough time.
So
It's a beautiful community.
Yeah, it is.
I've been out there many times.
Apple Country.
Yeah.
And I live right next door. I live in a small community. So my community of Bolton is 3,500.
And Bolton right next door, right?
And I was on the fire chief. They hired their first full-time fire chief
My sister
in
lives in
October.
Lancaster.
Oh, okay. So I know Lancaster well. I know
You've got
all
a
the
little bit of
selectmen.
a commute to get
but
here.
it's 3 days a week and 6 months. I'm not looking.
Right.
I commuted to Burlington.
Yeah.
And if I do the timing
if you do
right,
Bolton to Burlington.
and with the traffic.
The traffic's going the other way in the morning. You're going against the traffic,
Yeah.
against the traffic both ways, and so.
Yeah, that's true.
so-
Yeah, and I'll work the hours with you folks here as to, just avoid the traffic. So, I leave early in the morning to get to Burlington and,
By the time our
adjust.
meetings are over, there'll be no
It'll be
traffic
gone,
for
and
you.
that's the night meetings,
No, yeah.
I'm fortunate that we don't do a lot of late nights,
We don't either, truthfully, honestly.
Not like our old days when, I used to work till midnight, 1 o'clock for, certain boards.
Yeah, no.
Jack and I like to get to bed early.
Good.
Especially me, because
No comment.
I still get up
But we
very
do
early.
try not to, some of us do actually do things, but we don't. We're not the kind of board that, works until midnight anyway.
That's what,
At least it's been
and
my
I
experience.
asked my questions of Peter, so,
So.
They don't work till midnight.
No, he knows us pretty well. I'm
Yeah.
sure he's probably, he may have told you more than we wish he
You
told
make
you.
the staff do that, but we don't do it.
Okay, well, I won't belabor it. If you don't have any other questions, as I said, we're going to talk some more tomorrow night, and thank
Great.
you so much for coming in, and
thank you.
we'll be back in touch.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is great. And good luck.
And good luck to you in your retirement.
Yes. Yeah.
Give yourself a few months before you feel
What's that?
retired.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
So we have, that's it for
That's interesting.
our agenda. We'll be able to talk tomorrow.
Two
But
excellent candidates.
Just two excellent
Yeah.
candidates.
It's very
I
entertaining.
was, with only two people, you're always I was a little concerned. We're making this decision quickly. Is there going to be a choice? And I think that we do have viable choices, so
Yes, I think so, too.
I'm feeling comfortable that we'll have someone to get us through. Tomorrow night, we'll figure out hopefully who that's going to be. But if there's nothing else, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second that motion.
We never asked for discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you guys very much.
How come we don't have